What I really love about these two characters is that for Higuruma, he had someone in Yuji to pull him back. Geto just didn't get that opportunity because Gojo wasn't there to do it. Both of these sorcerers were seeing humans at their worst. In Higuruma's case, he is seeing defendants, whether they're guilty or innocent, and he's having to see them in these very dark spaces. Seeing the justice system consistently fail the people that it's supposed to protect. Geto is in the same boat.
He wanted to remain in a position where he could fight for people actively because he believed that people were worth defending even at their worst.
Yeah.
I think that over time, he was dealing with so much of the worst of people that he lost touch with that. He's just seeing everything go wrong and nothing change despite his best efforts and his best intentions. I think what he sees in Yuji is somebody who is at where he was once at. He says all that stuff to Yuji about like, I see the path that you're on, believing in like the nobility of the human soul. And I can tell you right now, there's nothing for you down that path. Everything ahead of you is darkness. Even if you shine a light to it, you will still have just darkness. Essentially saying like, you can try to do what I did and look at things as how bleak everything is and try to make sense of it and try to find something worth saving and preserving, but it's not going to work. You're going to find that there's nothing there. What you see in front of you, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Which we know that's not how Yuji sees the world at all.
The way that his values are so unwavering in how he displays with other people, it continues to reward him. He helps Higuruma come back. Higuruma gives him the point so that Yuji doesn't have to unalive someone so that he can keep his curse technique, aka gets to stay alive. Stepping into that space, as uncomfortable or as naive it might even feel, but like in Yuji's case, it consistently rewards him in the end, even with how difficult the process of getting there might actually look like.
Crazy Stupid Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we are here to talk about JJK Season 3, Episode 9, Tokyo Colony, Part 3. I loved this episode.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the music for just a second? Because that little song that they played, that's so beautiful.
Yeah. I know we talked a little bit about this last week, but it was kind of briefly, and it was like in between us conversing other things. The way JJK has sort of taken everything up to the next level this season, I feel like we need to just take a second. I know every week there's like a lot of hype and there's like semi-glazing of like, yo, this was the greatest thing ever. But we are going to get 24 episodes of this. And I know like anime doesn't really have this problem as much, but at least as an American, very rarely am I getting this amount of quality with this amount of quantity. Like that. Maybe you get 8 episodes. If you're lucky, you get 10. And you're always kind of having your fingers crossed of like, is Warner Brothers going to muck it up again like they did with season 2 of House of the Dragon? Or is Netflix or Disney Plus, are they going to Mickey Mouse it up in the finale? I think there is something very special about what we're seeing with anime right now that America, maybe the Western world, they haven't grasped it yet. Like I remember seeing, I think it was someone involved in like the DC Comics was like trying to wrap his mind around it. Like, how are these mangas so successful? How are these animes so successful? And how can we replicate it? I'm like, dude, I don't even know where to begin. But everything, it's not just like this spectacle. It is like,
they care about the story.
Yes.
They care about
so much.
A well-told story. This is also, I think, why Apple TV Plus shows are often so good. They appear to be less concerned with how they can be like the loudest in what they create, or like get the most attention, be the most viral all the time. And it seems like they are more concerned with telling very well told stories.
Yeah.
And there are times when it has ended up panning out and made like them a huge success, like with Severance. But Severance, that blew up after the first season was finished.
Yeah.
Like that entire season ended and people started to catch on and it became this big deal. And it was already renewed for season 2, as far as I know. It seems to me that when these companies really care about the story that they are telling and they believe in the story that they are telling, and they don't try to lean too heavily into fan theories and into what they think is going to get people talking about a show in this way at this time, when they don't meddle too much and they just let the story tell itself, everything works out, right?
Yeah.
Like it becomes hugely successful, and it becomes it's a good product, something that you can be proud of.
I mean, even just to bring it back to JJK, like the Maki episode, that felt like a standalone short story. There were so many characters that we were kind of quickly introduced that we feel like we knew them, like we understood them. The same thing with Higuruma. We got 2 episodes. He's a fan favorite because it's like we learned so much, we felt so much, and in all these episodes, like they're paying respects, homage to, and references to, like, not just like other Japanese fight scenes and movies and shows, but like Western ones as well. Like Kill Bill was like a huge influence on that Maki episode. I'm just like in awe of what I'm watching.
I think it's also like they believe in their audience, and I think that's something that's missing. I literally just watched this clip because everybody's talking about that thing that Timothée Chalamet said about the ballet and opera. I'm not about to get into all that. Okay, sorry, but prior to that comment, the lead up to that is a conversation that Matthew McConaughey and Timothée Chalamet are having about attention spans and art, and they're talking about how. The way that Matthew McConaughey phrases it is that like act 1 is like no longer a thing anymore in storytelling. The part of a story where you just ground people in the characters and in the setting, and you just establish things before you ramp up to all of the big moments later on, and how more and more studios and production companies are having them like cut that out or make it extremely short. Something that Timothée Chalamet said was that like they're even having it, so like he said he read something that like Netflix now wants, rather than like you lead up to like these big payoff moments at the end of something, Netflix now wants like these big action things and these big things at the forefront at the beginning, because they don't believe in the audience's attention spans to pay attention through something slower paced and make it through to the end. And so they're dumbing down the work essentially because they do not have faith in audiences. But something that Timothée Chalamet also pointed out in that conversation is that younger audiences, I think like Gen Z is more likely to go to the movies than millennials, like to go to the actual movie theater and pay and go and do that whole experience. Right? Like they brought up Frankenstein and how like that wasn't like a hugely like extremely fast-paced movie, but people loved it. Same thing with Oppenheimer. That movie was 3 hours long.
And it almost made $1 billion. And there's no action.
And people loved it. I understand why the impression is that audiences are no longer capable of this, because we are having all this conversation about shorter attention spans and, literacy rates and stuff. And all of that is real. And also one of the biggest things that you learn as an educator is that if you essentially pander to that level, people never rise up, right? Like if I just look at my classroom of students and say, man, they're not reading very well, they don't have good attention spans, and I just dumb down everything that I teach them to that level, they will never rise up to meet a higher standard. But what we see is that when these creators and production companies, when they tell stories at a high level and require audiences to rise up to that level to meet them, audiences will do it and they enjoy it.
Yeah. And it's not just with Jujutsu Kaisen, as phenomenal as this season. I mean, people fell in love with Frieren like very quickly. Some of the most well-renowned anime are ones where it's a pretty slow burning build-up. Like, everybody talks about One Piece and Hunter x Hunter. There were like 2 other arcs before we got to the Chimera Ant arc. And that's the one that like everybody thinks about, everybody talks about, everybody puts in their rankings. And all of the payoff that you're seeing in that particular arc is like, oh my gosh, everything is it's so deserved. It's not like not just the story. It's like you feel like you deserve it because you're like, I allowed myself to be immersed, right? I allowed myself to go through this journey, and the reward that I'm experiencing, seeing this payoff, is not something you cannot replicate it with a shorter time frame. It just does not. It doesn't work.
It's amazing to me that this lesson has not been learned. Like, I'm like, look at the success of Game of Thrones, a famously not fast-paced show at all. In fact, the biggest criticism that it got in its later seasons was that it was too fast.
Yeah.
Because audiences had become accustomed to a certain caliber of storytelling that took its time, and we expected that and wanted that. All that to say, shout out to Gege Akutami and all of the people behind JJK for, you know, being willing to tell a meaningful story that, like, yes, we have gotten a lot of action, we have gotten a lot of that, but the heart of each of these episodes has not been the action sequences and the fight scenes.
Yeah.
Those scenes are being used as tool to deepen our understanding of characters, and they are intentionally pausing within each of these episodes to give us these brief moments where things slow down. We get a flashback, we get some sort of inner monologue, something that it has nothing to do with the action that you're seeing happen in front of you. It's all about, what does this say about the characters? Why are you watching this? Why does this matter? It's not just about the coolest domain and the coolest curse technique and all of this. That's not really the focus at all. The focus is the characters and who they are and how that impacts their choices.
And once we get to like episode 20 through 24, listen, this is when you're going to get these moments where you're just going to be blown away. I literally cannot wait for anime only people, because if you guys are enjoying all of this build up and the character development, you will feel so rewarded. You're going to feel so rewarded, and people will be talking about this show for a very, very long time. First thing that I want to say, I love Yuji to death. I love that, one of my favorite MCs ever. But what made you think, if you couldn't lie to Hikari just a few episodes ago, that you were going to be able to lie to an actual lawyer? I'm sorry.
Listen, he did his mental math. The way that he got to his conclusion made sense, okay? He said, listen, if they know for sure that I did it, I'm screwed anyway. Okay? And so he said, I might as well take this route in the middle and try and work something out.
Look,
I get
man,
it.
I hear it, but this I don't know, man.
With the information that he had, I don't know what decision he should have made, you know?
Higuruma told him, just said that you ain't remember.
But he didn't know what the evidence was. Higuruma could say that because he knew that
I know.
Like, the evidence only showed him somewhere later. But
I feel
Yuji doesn't know that.
I feel like if Megami was on trial, he would have figured it out.
I don't know. This is what I find very interesting about Higuruma's technique, because it places the defendant essentially in the situation at such a disadvantage.
Sure.
Because you are showing up, you don't even know what you're going to be accused of, number one. It could be anything. A question I have is that, does the judge man ever just accuse people of something that they like 100% did not do, had nothing to do with? Because if it doesn't, it's like essentially whatever it accuses the person of, they did do in some capacity, whether there is like some nuance to it or not, they did do it. And so you're automatically at a disadvantage there, because you know what it's saying is true and you have no clue what the evidence is. You have no clue what the argument is. Like, you're going in completely blind with no information.
Well, I think that's the point.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But I just find that very interesting, because it does seem to mimic Japan's legal system.
Yes.
And that it is a nearly guaranteed guilty verdict.
Yes. Yeah.
Every single time. I also find it very interesting that the judgment knows everything about the defendant, but makes their verdict based solely on the evidence that is presented by either party, which goes back to what Higuruma was saying last week about justice being blind to all of these other outside factors. Essentially, judgment works in that exact same way, in that even with the knowledge that there's other things going on, like, he knows the situation with Yuji and Sukuna. We know he knows because he gave the evidence to Higuruma, but he still convicts Yuji and finds him guilty based solely on Yuji's admission of guilt, even knowing that there is more to the story than that.
Yeah.
And so it's just very interesting how his domain sort of evolved into essentially the thing that he hated the most about the system that he was in. It's kind of like he is prolonging his own torture. It's like he is, you know, because he spent so much time not believing in anybody or anything or any system's ability to change. It's like he's now in this situation where he is forced to continue to watch the same sort of injustices play out over and over and over again.
Higuruma's transformation is, I mean, it's tragic. Right? There's no other way to put it. Primarily because he inevitably becomes the very thing that he started his career wanting to protect, right? And the route in which he gets there is so fascinating because there is a very punitive response that he has even for the most minor things. Like when Yuji goes to that gambling, you know, place, confiscation is the verdict. But Higuruma is like pummeling Yuji for something that I guess in my mind is like not that severe. He doesn't draw any distinctions anymore. And not only that, all of his sentences is very binary, very black and white. Like there is very little to no room to do the thing that he was doing earlier, looking at all the other context. And he has this line where, as we're getting the flashback and he's about to attack Yuji, you know, where he says this thing of like weakness of victims, and then he says like the weakness of criminals. And he almost says it as if he sees them as synonymous now, right? Like he's completely lost himself into this thing that he swore he would defend against. Even the most progressive and the most leftist people in your politics and your social politics, if you allow nihilism to kick in, you can find yourselves intentionally or indirectly wanting to push and pursue the same sort of punitive and callous actions that you think this system that is currently in place is presenting on the most vulnerable people in society. People don't necessarily always think of it that way because you still somewhat believe like you're doing it for a righteous cause. In your framework, you think this system is so broken, let me place everything into my hands. But Higuruma's doing that, and it's just as brutal, right? Regardless of what you think your motives are, intent versus impact is still showing up in the very same way.
I also think what happened with Higuruma is when he says that thing about empathy means understanding everybody's weaknesses.
Yeah.
And, you know, weaknesses of criminals, weaknesses of victims. I think part of what happened is that if you're a defense attorney, you're seeing people at their worst a lot of the time. The episode prior focused on instances in which people were innocent, but you would also be defending people who were not
guilty,
innocent, who were guilty. And so you're interacting with a lot of darkness, honestly. You're interacting with a lot of horrible things, even in situations where your client is innocent. That crime from the last episode was a double homicide, right? Like you are just constantly interacting with people at their worst. You are constantly seeing the worst of humanity. And then you attach that to the ways that he's seeing the systems fail and the ways that he is seeing these prosecutors and judges not do their job appropriately. And I think that he says somewhere in there that like when he first made that statement to whoever that was,
like his mentor,
and he said, you know, something about people being weak and ugly, and like part of that being why he did not want to be a judge. He said that at the time because he believed that those things were meant to be cherished. He said that depravity that is unique to humankind essentially was something to be cherished. The way I took that being that he wanted to remain in a position where he could fight for people actively because he believed that people were worth defending even at their worst.
Yeah.
And I think that over time, he was dealing with so much of the worst of people that he lost touch with that and just began to see, I think he began to feel resentment towards the people that he was defending, towards the people who were prosecuting the cases, towards the judges, towards everybody, because he's just seeing everything go wrong and nothing change despite his best efforts and his best intentions.
Yeah.
He lost touch with the idea that like human dignity is worth protecting regardless. And he says that to Yuji. I think what he sees in Yuji is somebody who is at where he was once at. And he sees him, and I think it's like a mirror to himself, and it makes him feel badly. But before he can reach that realization, he feels the need to warn Yuji. Like he says all that stuff to Yuji about like, I see the path that you're on, believing in like the nobility of the human soul. And I can tell you right now, there's nothing for you down that path. Everything ahead of you is darkness. What the darkness that you see, that is what it is. Even if you shine a light to it, you will still have just darkness. Essentially saying like, you can try to do what I did and look at things as how bleak everything is and try to make sense of it and try to find something worth saving and preserving, but it's not going to work. You're going to find that there's nothing there. What you see in front of you, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Which we know that's not how Yuji sees the world at all.
Two things that you said that I really appreciated, starting off with with Yuji. I also think the mirror that you mentioned that Higuruma sees with Yuji is also reflected that he didn't want to be a judge when he started off his career for a number of reasons. I can imagine he sees the role of a judge, like being the final verdict in a system that he feels is weighted in one particular direction and places a lot of innocent people behind bars. And so his role, that isn't the place that I would want to be. Now, fast forward, he is being a judge. He's being the judge, the jury, the executioner. And now he sees Yuji, an innocent person, being wrongfully convicted. And he is one that's carrying out the sentence. And it's like something snapped back for him. Like he even says, like, I went back to my roots, essentially. Like in episode 8, when he's still in his bathtub, he says, have you ever killed someone that ticked you off? And he says, it feels much better than I expected. But at the end of this episode, he was like, have you ever killed someone of your own volition? It felt absolutely awful, doesn't it? So you see that he's sort of gone to like a complete 180 shift. The other thing that you said that really reminded me, we talked about this very briefly last week, was how similar he reminds me of Geto Suguru. There's so many similarities between Higuruma and Geto, primarily with the weight of what they're carrying. Both of these, I guess we can call them sorcerers, but both of these sorcerers in their previous stage of life were seeing humans, or even Geto's case, sorcerers, like at their worst, right? In Higuruma's case, he is seeing defendants, whether they're guilty or innocent, primarily the ones that are guilty, and he's having to see them in these very dark spaces, people that are wrongly convicted, people that he has to defend that he knows are guilty, seeing the justice system consistently fail the people that it's supposed to protect. Geto is in the same boat. What I really love about these two characters is that for Higuruma, he had someone in Yuji to pull him back. Geto just didn't get that opportunity because Gojo wasn't there to do it. And you see these two characters as like, I don't know, like mirrors of each other, of like, this is what happens when that variable of not having that companionship to pull you back in from the nihilism, this is what it ultimately can look like. So there was something that between those two characters that I felt very familiar.
And I feel like this entire message is very timely because we are living through a very dark period of history right now, where it is easy to look at the state of the world and feel like there is nothing worthwhile left saving, or nothing attainable, like nothing that can be achieved, which I think is kind of where Higuruma was at. For Yuji, it's his earnestness that often is saving him, right? Like it's him looking at the world, not turning away from the reality of it, but earnestly saying and expressing the way that it impacts him.
Yeah.
That often is saving him, that is providing him community, and that is also allowing him to feel some semblance of hope about what can be done, about where we can go, and to keep going in the fight.
You can even say that, to sort of stay with Yuji, the way that his values are so unwavering in how he displays with other people, it continues to reward him, right? Like he shows that to Megumi, and in return, Megumi pleads with Gojo to save his life, right? And so Gojo goes in and postpones Yuji's execution, and a number of instances where Megumi's shown up. Like at the beginning of the Cullen game, he's already thinking about a way so that Yuji doesn't have to unalive someone. Same thing in this episode. He helps Higuruma come back. Higuruma gives him the point so that Yuji doesn't have to unalive someone so that he can keep his curse technique, aka gets to stay alive. So I just feel like stepping into that space, as uncomfortable or as naive it might even feel, but like in Yuji's case, it consistently rewards him in the end, even with how difficult the process of getting there might actually look like, you know.
And it also keeps him from falling off that brink, like that edge of where Higuruma has landed. Because I do think Yuji could have very easily ended up in that place through his self-hatred, right? He felt so terribly about what happened in Shibuya. It's his honesty about that with the people around him that I think keeps him from landing in a place very similar to Higuruma or to Geto, where you've essentially given up all hope, where you don't believe in the goodness of anybody, including yourself. And so like nothing is worth it. Yeah. Right. Like he says in this episode, like, even if I didn't do it, I was too weak to stop it. And that word weak comes up again. And Higuruma, essentially what it comes down to in that moment, because his response is, maybe there are more weak people like you in the world. And he is saying that as a good thing. Yeah. Right. Like sometimes that what you're calling weakness or that restraint is not necessarily, it's not a fault. It's not something that you need to feel guilty for, right? It's human. It's just you being human, and people need to be protected in all of their humanity, including you. And I feel like having people continue to say things like that to him is what keeps him from completely giving in to the guilt that is obviously still weighing on him. Yeah. It's not going to just be over overnight, but he has people to continue carrying him through it. I really liked also the very last thing that Higuruma says to Yuji when he's leaving, and Yuji asks him like, hey, maybe stick around. We could use you. Higuruma says, if I stick with you, I'll probably hate myself even more. But he's clear, like, that's not a criticism of you. So the implication being it's a criticism of him, right? Like seeing that Yuji is the person that he probably could have been had he not gone down the path of nihilism and self-hatred that he went down. It's caused him to resent himself. And now he understands, even though he's had this 180 shift, he can never really go back to that person that he was before because he's done so much. Yeah. Right?
I mean, the first 2 points he got.
Right. Yeah. He has killed people because of this. He has given up hope because of this. There's probably people that he did not save that he could have saved because of this. And so it's also like kind of a warning message of like going down that path, it leaves a lasting mark on you as a person. And it's not that you can't come back from it or that you can't find healing, but
there's gonna be some scars.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
There will always be some scars left over from that.
We had a couple of comments that I kind of want to say because I feel like they did a really good job. The first one was sorry if we're not pronouncing their username right, but Kahiri7985, they sort of also talk about like the Higuruma and Geto comparison, but they also say, I think if it wasn't for the Cullen games, Higuruma would have went down a similar path as Geto, because essentially he wouldn't have met Yuji, and there's no one there to pull him back. He would have kept on unaliving sorcerers, which it's so interesting how like Kenjaku has his plan for how he wants this evolution to go for these sorcerers, And every sorcerer that Yuji comes in contact with is like a reverse course. Like you're evolving in a better version, right? Like Kenjaku is like, I want you to evolve simply out of survival of the strongest, eliminating those that are weaker. And through that, like we see with Reggie, the character that Megami's sort of going with, like there is a darker outlook on life that comes out of it. Very lifelessly unaliving sorcerers. There's no other points. The point of living isn't even existing. It's just, how much stronger can I get? How much stronger can I get? How can I get to the strongest sorcerer? Yuji kind of comes in, and everyone he's been in contact with, like it topples that worldview. So it's giving them a second chance, but in a better version of it, if that makes sense, you know? The other comment that I thought was really interesting, Anna2731 says, fun fact, the blindfold on Lady Justice was originally intended as a critique, showing justice blind to injustice. But over time, it got reinterpreted as the opposite of its meaning. So I find it fascinating because the original meaning makes so much more sense, and it is more like intuitive to, obviously, thanks to the conversations surrounding it. You have to bend over backwards to explore how the blindfold is actually a good thing and how it represents impartiality, which I feel like kind of goes into some of the conversations we were having last week. Just feel like it's spot on. All right, y'all. Well, those are our thoughts on this episode. We'd love to hear what you guys think. Let us know in the comment sections below. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.